Hi there. More fan protests are on their way, but what effect, if any, will this have on the owners? It feels like this football club is heading for more conflict, more turbulence, and more pain. We all know the owners have a history of ignoring fans. Unless upcoming protests move the Premier League or the government to get involved, history tells us protests alone don't work. Without any form of intervention or mediation, my fear is that we're stuck in a never-ending cycle of despair and decline. I do fully support the fans' right to protest. I just want to see fans listened to this time by the power brokers responsible for governing our game. I spent the last couple of days listening to the universal condemnation of Manchester United's grim financial figures. Those latest figures reveal the shocking level of mismanagement by the owners. Total debts now spiralling past £1 billion. And the consequence of that grotesque level of borrowing is that this football club has now paid out over £1 billion in debt interest since the Glazers leveraged buyout 20 years ago. That level of debt and the interest paid to service that debt is the biggest single reason this football club is in such a vulnerable financial position. I can't believe the Premier League has never investigated or called out the Glazers for the damage they've done to our football club. Surely there's a case to answer about them being fit and proper owners of this country's most famous football club. Financial mismanagement is one thing, then there's the corresponding decline we're seeing out on the football pitch, despite more than £2 billion spent on players since the Glazers moved in. Our recruitment has been so bad for so long, the club's credit is effectively maxed out while we currently languish in 15th place in the Premier League. It's a sorry state of affairs. A sorry state of affairs that leaves Ruben Amorim walking on thin ice after making the worst start of any appointment since Sir Alex Ferguson retired 12 years ago. The financial straitjacket that now weighs down United means Amorim has to be a miracle worker and win the Europa League if he's going to stand any realistic chance of being backed in the next transfer window, the level he clearly needs to be backed. I'm wondering how Ratcliffe and his Ineos team could have made a worse mess of trying to fix what the Glazers broke. And I'm tired of hearing from fans who say we've not given Ratcliffe enough time to stop the rot. A year on, it's already clear the new co-owner's primary focus is going to be building a new stadium within a government-backed regeneration of Old Trafford. Meantime, ticket price rises at the thin end of the wedge for long-suffering fans. And ticket price rises should be a concern right across the board for Premier League clubs, because American owners know how much they can charge sports fans in the USA. And with 11 of the 20 Premier League clubs now either fully owned or part-owned by Americans, I fully expect ticket prices to become a hot potato, not just at Manchester United. At Old Trafford, ticket price rises have come along with the brutal cost-cutting by the owners. But financial benefits to the football club by ticket price rises and cost-cutting are dwarfed by the owners' self-inflicted multi-million-pound mistakes. Surely there should be consequences for negligent owners who've put Manchester United into this perilous state. It's time for action. These owners need to be held accountable for this slow and gradual self-destruction of one of the greatest football clubs the world has ever seen. The problem is there is currently no system in place to keep the owners in check and make them accountable. As we saw once again when Abraham Glazer walked away from a Sky TV reporter in Miami, the owners can do what they want. They can avoid our questions. They can treat fans with contempt, but United fans will not be sidelined. This current period of non-communication by Ratcliffe and the Glazers is only going to heat up the upcoming protests. Protests that I expect to reach fever pitch on March the 9th when we play Arsenal in the Premier League. Organising group, the 1958, have been rallying support for a couple of weeks now. The current reminders of just how bad the club's position has become are all reigniting this long-running war with the owners. I say war because that's what it's become. Fans on one side, owners on the other. The casualties are what we're seeing out on the pitch. Results have gone from bad to worse. Players aren't performing, and Ruben Amorim is starting to look like a defeated general. His battle plan is just not working. He needs reinforcements. And so far, the reinforcements provided have been far from adequate. Patrick Dorgu looks like a sound addition, a player with real potential, but is the only senior player added to our first team squad since Amorim arrived. A squad weakened in numbers by a growing injury list and players moved out on loan. It's ironic that Rashford, Antony and Malacia are all doing well on loan away from this toxic atmosphere at Old Trafford. Meantime, Amorim desperately needs a result at Goodison Park on Saturday. He needs his players to stand up and to fight for him. And that gets harder and harder to demand when you consider how these players have been criticised and written off by so many. The lack of goals from Højlund, from Xerxes, from Garnacho is a real weakness, and the more they misfire, the harder it gets. When Amorim suggested this was the worst team in the club's history, I don't think that was the best way to motivate this squad of players. Football is a confidence game, and this team's confidence has probably never been lower than it is right now. The club's massive financial problems aren't helping either, and neither will the protests. It feels like the club is caught in an inevitable downward spiral. Until the whole mindset engulfing the club can be changed, this football club is in real trouble. It's time for change, but how can that be achieved? We all know why we're in this mess. The reason for Manchester United's current state of distress is down to the Glazers. The Glazers ran this football club into the ground with what I can only describe as criminal negligence and gross mismanagement. If only the powers that be would hold the owners accountable. Sadly, Ratcliffe has made things worse. His brutal cost-cutting has destroyed morale at the football club. And Monday's latest financial figures revealed just how badly this decision-making has further handicapped Manchester United. The cost of removing Erik ten Hag and his backroom staff just 13 matches into the new season was £14.5 million. And that figure doesn't include the cost of replacing Ten Hag with Ruben Amorim. The cost of bringing Amorim to Old Trafford is thought to be up to £10 million, with United having to pay Sporting compensation to buy Ruben out of his contract. Whatever that figure is, that will come out when the next quarterly figures are announced later in the year. Meantime, Monday's figures also reveal that it cost United over £4 million to bring Dan Ashworth to Old Trafford from Newcastle and then to sack him just weeks later. Coincidentally, that's around the same figure the club have saved by slashing 250 jobs. Incredible that the Dan Ashworth fiasco alone cancelled out any financial benefit of removing 250 people from their jobs with Manchester United. Personally, I'm not worried by Ineos cutting back on their sponsorship deals elsewhere. It makes absolute sense for Ineos to stop sponsoring our rival Spurs. If they can get out of the 5-year deal they agreed in 2022, that's a good thing, because it's absurd for co-owners of Manchester United to be giving money to Premier League rivals if they can avoid it. Meantime, getting out of other sports makes sense if Ineos actually want to be all in to support Manchester United. But it does raise questions about the ethics and operational competence of Ineos. New Zealand Rugby are suing Ineos for breach of contract after pulling their deal with the All Blacks. They've also ended their support of Ben Ainsley and his America's Cup campaign, while the Grenadiers cycling team are also looking for new sponsors after Ineos say they don't want to spend any more money on cycling. Ironic that Brailsford, the cycling guru who preaches marginal gains, has made no tangible difference at our football club. While we're making cuts, surely Brailsford is the biggest waste of money at Manchester United right now. Looking ahead, all I can see is more pain and more misery for our football club, unless we see drastic change starting with the ownership. I've long campaigned for some form of a fan ownership model. We also need a system where decision makers are accountable and can be voted out by the fans. I'm more convinced than ever that the game needs protecting by new regulations. Whether that's done by a football regulator, the Premier League or the government, we need a system that protects all elite football clubs, not just Manchester United. Some clubs, of course, currently don't need protecting. Our rivals Liverpool are doing brilliantly under their American ownership. It's hugely impressive how Liverpool are playing attractive football and dominating without the benefit of state ownership. But Manchester United have been weighed down by the worst kind of American owners, who've sacrificed our football club for their own personal gain, bailed out by one British billionaire who could have removed the Glazers from Manchester United altogether. There's still time for Ratcliffe to make things right, of course, but so far everything he's done has alienated fans, former players and many people who've worked at Manchester United for decades. It's time for the fans to tell Ratcliffe and the Glazers what they think of this sad, sad situation.